Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're talking about layers of fear on the PlayStation 5, and that's the first thing what we need to consider. I just have the PlayStation 5 version, no PC version, no Xbox Series version was tested, so I can't really be sure that the HDR settings or the HDR is the same in the other versions as well, but usually they're quite similar, okay? So first of all, this needs to be considered. Just the PlayStation 5 version is tested. And of course, we're going to answer the question, does this game, does Layers of Fear supports the HDR system level calibration? We're talking about any black level rays. Do we have black level rays in this game? We're also talking about, of course, what is better? Maybe HGiG dynamic tone mapping on. We don't know yet. And we are, of course, talking about the general HDR quality in this game, because this of course is the most important thing besides some numbers in nits and whatsoever, which I'm going to present you of course as well. But most important is, how is the HDR implementation in Layers of Fear? So I would say no, there's something else. We need to consider most of the content what you're going to see is recorded off my LG G2 with this camera, okay? So even I'm trying my very best to record in the highest quality, my camera is not able to capture all the fine details, okay? Especially in the darker scenes, you will see maybe black level crush, okay? And the problem is now, if I would increase my ISO level to actually capture some details in darker areas, I will have a lot of clipping and specular highlights, okay? So it's very hard actually to do the right thing with a camera. But what I'm trying to do, of course, is I'm trying my very best to capture in the highest possible quality. And of course, you have to listen very closely when I'm pointing things out, okay? So that's to consider. And now I think it's time to start. And I think the first question what we have is, or what we should answer is, does Layers of Fear supports the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5? And the short answer is very simple. No, it does not. So that means regardless of what you set up here, if you set this to 0 or to 10,000 nits, there is no impact in the game whatsoever. So that means, it's actually not too bad, because we have a lot of games where we have no HDR system level calibration support, but we have really nice HDR settings in the game. So what about this? But unfortunately, we just don't have no HDR system level calibration in this game. We have also no HDR settings at all. The only thing what we have is actually a toggle switch between HDR on and off. And then when we change it to off, we have actually a gamma screen or gamma settings, but nothing for HDR. And there we have the first problem, because the maximum peak brightness in this game is up to 10,000 nits. And that's of course a problem, because now we can expect a lot of clipping and specular highlights. As you can see here, we're reaching 10,000 nits in the menu or in the intro sequence already quite simple. And we have also some objects in the game which are having a maximum peak brightness around 6,000, 8,000 and also 10,000 nits. Okay, so now let's answer the question, do we have HDR black level rays in this game? And unfortunately the answer is yes. As you can see on on my right bottom screen, the histogram, you can clearly see that we don't have a perfect HDR black level floor, and we can easily prove this. When we're looking at this chimney here, or whatever you call this here, the fireplace, and we're just going to the menu and we disabling HDR, you can see what I'm talking about. Now the HDR or the black level floor is now almost perfect, and the whole picture now looks much better. So don't get me wrong, the HDR black level rays in this game is not as much as in other games, but it is enough that you can actually, or you lose some details here. And I know it's very hard for the camera to catch this. I don't even know if you see anything right now, because this game is very dark. And because the game is very dark, it's so important that we have perfect HDR black level rays. But again, unfortunately, when you look at the histogram at the moment, you can see the black level floor is not perfect. Let's do this again. Let's disable this. HDR just disabled, and you can see it just much better. And you need to keep in mind, I haven't touched the gamma screen at all. This right now are the recommended settings or the standard factory settings. So the only thing what I would do actually to make it even better without turning HDR off in the main menu actually on the PlayStation 5 console, I would decrease this by 5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's all what you need to do. And in my opinion, you have then a perfect SDR picture in the HDR picture format. Okay, so now let's talk about the HDR quality in this game in general. So we know already that we have some sort of HDR black level rays, which of course is not a good thing for a game like that, where we actually have one very big aspect in a game, contrast, because we have a very dark game and we have very bright specular highlights. And you can see when you look at the top right corner, the max CLL is jumping around 800, sometimes 6000, depending what's going on the screen. Now we have 6000. So we have very, very bright objects. And having this in combination with a very bad black level floor is not a good thing, especially not in games like that. And in terms of the general quality of HDR symbols or HDR specular highlights, like let's say this lamp, because this is actually, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but this is what you can expect in the game. So far as I played the game, this is what you get in HDR, this lamp. So when we comparing this with SDR or with the SDR picture in the HDR picture format, that's important to know, then you get this as a result. So there is not much of a difference in terms of how specular highlights actually looking in this game. Of course you get a difference in terms of slightly the colors are different, and of course the maximum peak brightness is a complete different. And yes, I agree, you get a little bit of a better it does look a little bit better in HDR. I fully agree on that. The problem is that because of the black level floor, because the black level floor is raised, and you can see clearly this here, and I'm very sure the camera can't capture this, but in this chimney here, in this fireplace here, on the back, you have actually some tiles or something like that, or bricks. And right now it's very hard to see them, but when I'm disabling HDR, it is better. I have more details because the black floor is not elevated. So that's a very, very big improvement actually. And unfortunately in games like that, we can't have any raised black levels because it just destroys the whole picture. So let's continue talking about the HDR quality in this game in general. And usually what I'm always doing is I'm looking at specular highlights and I'm comparing the impact from HGiG versus dynamic tone mapping off. And in this game, the difference is very, very, very minor. I can see it here with my own eyes, and maybe it's very hard to see for you on the camera, but the ceiling light is changing slightly when I'm changing from HGiG to dynamic tone mapping off. But this is so hard to see. It's really not worth to mention. Even the weird thing is that my analyzing tool right now is actually telling me we have a maximum CLL from up to 8000 nits. I really don't know where. Maybe we have very fine minor details in the specular highlights, but it's just literally not to see. And especially not when you play the game, because then you don't have time to look at those details. And usually most of the time when we're having brighter objects like this here, we are actually talking about a maximum CLL around 250, 300, 500 nits, as you can see on the histogram. So this is not even close to HDR. But of course I have to agree, I haven't played the whole game and I don't know if we have in the later game maybe better details or better HDR elements where you can see actually really some nice details when you enable HDR. But right now, as you can see here, there is actually literally no difference at all. Even the analyzing tool is saying we have right now 1300, 1500, 1800 nits. Where is this? Where are the highlights actually? I can't see it, and I don't think that the analyzing tool right now is lying, because we can see the spikes actually up to 2000 nits here on the histogram, or I can see it at least. But again, it's not possible to see it with the own eyes. And I'm not saying they are not there, but they are just maybe too minor, too small to see with their own eyes. Okay, so let's continue talking about HGiG, dynamic tone mapping off, dynamic tone mapping on. I mean, usually in some games, dynamic tone mapping on can be useful. I would not use it in this game if you like to play in HDR, because the game is actually meant to be dark, and dynamic tone mapping on is just over-brighten almost everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, maybe some people like it, but in this game I really don't think it's a good idea. Even the contrast is maybe getting a little bit better because you have higher maximum average picture brightness, let's say like this, but in general I think it's just too much. And again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but there are scenes in the game they are meant to be very, very grayish, especially in the very beginning of the game, and I don't want to spoil this, but the very beginning of the game looks really very, very washed out, and the black level floor is really crazy, but believe me, it's the same as in SDR, or more or less the same. But when you use now dynamic tone mapping on top, it will just ruin the whole picture completely, because the game is meant to be very, very dark with just minor lighting effects like lamps or stuff like that. So again, my recommendation is actually, if you like to play this game with HDR enabled, then I would play, of course, in a complete dark room with HGiG. Okay, so what are my recommendations now? And let's summarize the video here. I would not recommend to play this game in any HDR picture format at all. So I would actually disable HDR in the PlayStation 5 menu and play this game completely in SDR. And the reason is quite simple, because you will have the best experience then, because in SDR and complete SDR you have great contrast, you have almost no problem at all. Even you leave the gamma setting at the factory setting, but I would actually recommend go into this menu and decrease this until you can't barely read this left symbol anymore, or layers of fear anymore, and then you have such a great contrast in this game. Is unbelievable. You will miss out, of course, a little bit of specular highlights, but as I told you already, it's very hard to see actually those details. So in terms of contrast, SDR, pure SDR with disabling HDR in the PlayStation 5 menu is absolute to recommend, and that's my way actually to play this game. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this video. Let me know in the comment section what you think about Layers of Fear, what you think about the HDR implementation, what you think about whatever you think, okay? Let me know it in the comment section. I thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. And if you're new to my channel, you know the drill. Please leave a like, share and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I see you guys next time. Bye.